Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are not just scratching the surface, we are drilling down to the absolute core. We're tackling the question that really sits at the bottom of the well.
It really is the bedrock, isn't it? I mean, everything else, politics, culture, morality, how you live your life, it all just sits on top of how you answer this one specific question.
Exactly. And let's not beat around the bush. The question is, did all of this, the stars burning in the sky, the coffee in your cup, the neurons firing to let you hear the sentence, did it all happen by random accident?
Or is there a deliberate, intelligent design behind it?
It is the ultimate showdown.
It is. It's the debate between monotheism and specifically the concept of ta'id, which is the absolute oneness of a creator, in atheism, particularly the materialist view that the universe is just a closed system that just popped into existence without a who or a why.
And to guide us through this massive landscape, we are dissecting a text called Between Monotheism and Atheism by Mahmoud Hussein Awad.
It's a fascinating piece of work. And I think what stands out immediately is the tone. Awad isn't interested in just, preaching to the choir here. He's not saying, believe because I said so or believe because it feels good.
Right, he's treating this almost like a court case.
Exactly. He wants to construct a verdict. He's laying out evidence. He's building a case using logic, modern science, and a really deep historical analysis of texts.
That's what drew me into this source. It felt like a cross-examination of reality itself. And the author's mission is, well, it's pretty bold.
It is.
He wants to dismantle the arguments of materialism and naturalism, the whole idea that nature just created itself. And he wants to do it by showing that faith is actually the most rational, logical conclusion you can possibly reach.
And that is the core premise that we have to keep in mind today. The idea that faith and reason are not enemies. In fact, Awad argues that if you follow reason to its absolute limit, if you don't get off the bus early, it inevitably drops you off at the station of faith.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the three main pillars of his argument. First, we're going to look at the logical impossibility of chance, which gets into some mind-bending math.
It really does.
Then we're going to look at these specific scientific claims found in ancient scripture, what he calls scientific miracles.
And that part is just wild. We're talking about detailed embryology and astrophysics written down in the 7th century. It's something else.
And finally, we're going to bust some myths about the history of religion and science, because there is this idea that they have always been at war, and our source says that is just historically false.
It's going to be a journey. We're going from, abstract philosophy all the way down to the microscopic details of a human cell.
Let's jump right into the first segment then, logic. Specifically, the argument against chance.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the author starts by addressing the common atheist or materialist claim that the universe, with all its unbelievable complexity, just sort of happened.
Right.
That given enough time, chaos eventually produced order.
Yes, it's a variation of the infinite monkey theorem. The idea that if you have enough monkeys typing on enough typewriters for enough time, one of them will eventually produce the complete works of Shakespeare.
Right, which sounds plausible in theory, but
Agrad attacks this head-on with a classic analogy that I think really clarifies the absurdity of that claim when you apply it to the universe. He uses the analogy of the printing press.
okay, walk us through this because it's a visual that really sticks with you.
So imagine a printing press, but not a modern digital one. Imagine the old school kind with individual lead type for each letter.
I'm with you.
Now, imagine you have a giant basket just full of these loose letters, thousands of them, all jumbled up, A's, B's, exclamation points, commas, everything.
Okay, I'm visualizing a complete mess. Just a pile of lead.
Exactly, a state of total chaos. Now, imagine you take that basket and you throw the letters up into the air, or you just scatter them randomly onto a blank sheet of paper, or maybe you just shake the basket and dump it out.
All right, I'm seeing letters flying everywhere.
Now, ask yourself, what are the mathematical odds that those letters, as they fall, will arrange themselves perfectly to form a coherent, rhyming poem? Or let's say a complex textbook on philosophy.
I mean, theoretically, maybe one in a number so big I can't even say it, but practically, it's zero. It's never going to happen.
Practically, it is impossible. You might get a word here or there by sheer luck. You might get the or cat. You might get and. But you will never get a Shakespearean sonnet.
Donna share.
It doesn't matter how many times you throw the basket. It doesn't matter if you do it for 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years. Chaos does not naturally organize into semantic meaning in a complex functional information.
And Awad's point is that the universe is a lot more complicated than a sonnet.
Infinitely more. A book is just ink and paper. It's symbols on a page.
Mm.
The universe involves fine-tuned laws of physics, like the gravitational constant, which has to be precise to an insane number of decimal points or stars wouldn't form.
Or they'd burn out too fast, or they wouldn't ignite at all.
Exactly. You get the positioning of stars to support life, the chemical balance of our atmosphere, the properties of water. If we accept that a simple book cannot be written by an explosion of loose letters, why do we accept that the universe, this infinitely more complex book, was written by an explosion of chaos?
It puts the scale of the problem into perspective. We accept design in small things, like a book or a watch, but we're asked to deny it in the massive thing, the universe itself.
Precisely. It's an inconsistency in logic, according to the author.
But usually when you push back on this, people say, well, biology isn't a printing press, it's not totally random, chemicals react. Given billions of years, things combine, and natural selection favors the good combinations.
And that is where the source pivots from a simple analogy to actual hard science. He brings up what he calls the protein probability. This is where the math gets really, really crushing for the chance argument, specifically for the origin of life.
Okay, break down the protein probability for us, because I think people hear protein and they just think of a steak or a protein shake.
Right. And in biology, proteins are, they're the machines of life. They do everything. They're the building blocks, the messengers, the enzymes. But a protein isn't just a random blob of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very, very specific chain of amino acids. Think of it like a password or a very long sentence where every single letter has to be in the right place.
Okay, so the order matters intensely.
Crucially, it's everything. There are 20 different types of amino acids used in life. To make a functional protein, you need to arrange hundreds, sometimes thousands, of these amino acids in a specific sequence. It has to be precise.
And if you get it wrong?
If you get the sequence wrong, you don't get a slightly less good protein. You get useless chemical soup. It's just junk. It doesn't fold correctly. It doesn't have a function. It doesn't do anything useful for life.
So it's like a combination lock. If the combination is left 34, right 12, left 22, and you do left 34, right 12, left 23, the locker doesn't open. It's not close enough.
Exactly. It's all or nothing. Now, the source cites scientific calculations, and this is from mainstream biology, not just from the author, regarding the probability of the necessary atoms joining together in the correct order to form just one single average-sized protein molecule by random chance in some primordial soup.
And what's the number? I'm bracing myself.
It is astronomically low. Different scientists give different estimates, but we are talking about numbers like 1 in 10 to the power of 160. That's a 1 with 160 zeros after it.
I can't even visualize that number.
Nobody can. To put it in perspective, there are only about 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the entire known universe. So the odds are just. They are functionally zero. You have a better chance of winning the lottery every single day for a year than a single protein forming by accident.
And that is for one protein.
Correct. And here's the kicker. A single living cell, the simplest known unit of life like a bacterium, contains thousands of different complex proteins, all working in harmony, all interacting with each other like a tiny, intricate city.
So the argument is, if chance can't even build the brick, the single protein, how could it possibly build the house, which is the cell?
Let alone the city, which is the human body.
Right.
Precisely. The author argues that believing this happened by accident actually requires more blind faith than believing in a creator. You are believing in a statistical miracle, a mathematical impossibility.
That's a heavy statement. It completely flips the script on who is being irrational in this debate.
It does. It recasts faith in chance as the less logical position.
But there's a counter-argument to this, of course. People will say, okay, maybe it wasn't pure random chance. Maybe it was nature. Nature selected the best options. Evolution guided it.
Right. Natural selection or Mother Nature designed this. One spends a good amount of time dismantling this personification of nature.
Personification is the right word. We talk about nature like it's a woman or a spirit or some kind of conscious force. You know, nature found a way.
And the source argues that we need to stop being poetic and start being scientific. What is nature? When you strip away the metaphor, what is it actually?
Well, it's physics, it's chemistry, it's gravity, it's the weather.
Exactly. According to the text, nature is simply a set of laws. Thermodynamics, gravity, electromagnetism, fluid dynamics. These laws are, to use the author's description, deaf, blind, and ignorant.
That sounds harsh, but he means they aren't conscious. They don't have a mind.
Right. They have no will. They have no intent. Gravity pulls things down. It doesn't decide to pull things down because it wants to form a planet. Chemical A reacts with chemical B because of its valency in electron shells. not because it wants to create a cell. Nature has no foresight.
That's a key distinction. A law implies a mechanism, a process, not a mind.
Yes, the verdict in the text is that claiming nature created the universe is like claiming a machine built itself, or that the laws of engineering built a skyscraper. No, an engineer used the laws of engineering.
So nature is the system.
Nature is the system. It is the creation. It cannot be the creator because it lacks the consciousness, the will, and the knowledge required to design and create.
It's the difference between the painting and the painter. You can't say the paintbrushes and the canvas and the laws of color theory created the Mona Lisa.
A perfect analogy.
Hmm.
The paintbrush is the tool. Nature is the tool. But who is holding the brush? Who mixed the colors? Who had the vision of the smile? The brush didn't do that. The laws of physics didn't do that.
And this leads us directly to the fundamental logical principle that really anchors his whole argument. The law of causality.
Every effect must have a cause. It's the bedrock of science and logic. Nothing moves unless something moves it. Nothing exists unless something caused it to exist. It's inescapable.
The source tells this great little anecdote here, the story of the Bedouin. It's so simple, but it really cuts through all the philosophical noise.
It's a classic story, and it's brilliant in its simplicity. So, a Bedouin, a nomad living in the desert, someone without, a formal university training in philosophy, was asked by a scholar how he knows there is a creator.
Okay.
The Bedouin didn't give a lecture on quantum physics or quote Aristotle. He simply pointed to the ground and said, "Camel droppings indicate the presence of a camel, and footprints in the sand indicate that someone walked there."
It's pure deductive reasoning, cause and effect 101.
Yes. He then looked up at the sky and said, "So, the sky with its constellations, the earth with its valleys, and the seas with their waves, do these not indicate the presence of a knower, a creator?"
If a footprint proves a walker, then the universe proves a maker.
It just cuts through the over-intellectualizing. Sometimes we get so lost in the complex details that we miss the obvious, powerful logic staring us in the face.
But then, of course, Awad has to address the favorite rebuttal of the skeptic. The question that every Philosophy 101 student asks. Okay, if everything has a cause, who created the creator?
The infinite regress. Turtles all the way down. It's the go-to response.
Right. So how does the author handle that one?
Logically.
Okay.
The source argues that you cannot have an infinite chain of creators or causes. Think about it. If A was created by B, and B was created by C, and C was created by D, and so on forever, then nothing would ever actually come into existence.
Why not? That seems a bit counterintuitive.
Because you'd never get to the start. Imagine a soldier who wants to shoot his rifle, but he has to ask permission from the corporal. The corporal has to ask the sergeant, and the sergeant has to ask the lieutenant, and the captain, and the major.
And it goes on forever.
If that chain of command goes on forever, and nobody has the ultimate authority to just say, fire, does the shot ever happen?
No. They're stuck waiting for a permission that never comes.
Exactly. The universe exists. The shot was fired. Therefore, the chain of permission, the chain of causes, cannot be infinite. Logic demands a starting point.
You need a first cause.
You need an uncaused cause, a first mover who exists outside the chain of causality, something that isn't part of the system but created the system, something that wasn't created.
Something that doesn't need a creator because it exists outside of our concepts of time and space and cause and effect.
Something that just, a being that is self-sufficient and eternal, and that, in the text, is the logical definition of the creator.
Okay, so we've established the logical framework. The universe is too complex for chance. The printing press analogy holds up. Nature is a tool, not a builder. And logic demands a first cause. But there's another layer of resistance people have.
Right.
It's not just logic, it's perception. So segment 2 is all about the limits of materialism, because even if the logic is sound, people really struggle with what they can't see.
This is the see it to believe it fallacy,
Yeah.
or the show me the evidence argument, where evidence is narrowly defined as something you can put in a test tube.
We've all met someone, or maybe we are that person at times, who says, look, I'm a rational person. If I can see it, touch it, hear it, measure it, I believe it. If I can't, it's a fairy tale. Show me God and I'll believe.
Empiricism.
Yeah.
And it's a valid and powerful tool for measuring the physical world. But Awad argues it's a terrible tool for defining all of reality. The text points out that we all believe in things we cannot see, purely based on their effects. We do it every single day without a second thought.
Like what? Give us an example from the source.
Okay, the examples given are things like pain, electricity, and gravity. You don't see gravity. You can't put gravity in a jar or look at it under a microscope.
Yeah.
You see its effect, the apple falling from the tree.
Right.
You don't see electricity flowing through a wire. You see its effect. The light bulb turns on. You don't see pain. You feel it. And you see its effect on a person. They grimace, they cry, they pull their hand away from a hot stove.
So we accept the existence of the force or the feeling because of the impact it has on the physical, observable world.
Precisely. If you stuck strictly to seeing is believing, you'd have to deny gravity exists. You'd have to say, I see an apple moving towards the ground, but I don't see the force moving it, so the force isn't real. That would be absurd. We infer the cause from the effect.
The source includes a dialogue here that is quite witty. It's a conversation between a believer and an atheist that really drives this home.
Yes, it's a great little thought experiment. The believer asks the atheist, do you have a mind?
I can see where this is going. It's a trap.
It is. The atheist obviously says, yes, of course. I'm using it right now to have this conversation.
So the believer asks.
The believer asks, have you seen it? Have you touched it? Can you tell me its color or its weight? Have you dissected your own brain to find the mind?
And the answer to all of those is obviously no.
Right. If you dissect a brain, you find gray matter, blood vessels, neurons, cerebrospinal fluid. You don't find thoughts sitting there like little stones. You don't find reason. You can't point to a specific neuron and say, there, that's the memory of my 5th birthday.
But we know the mind exists. We know consciousness is real because we see its effects. Speech, invention, art, complex society, this deep dive right now.
So if you apply the strict see it to believe it rule, you'd have to deny you have a mind.
Right.
You'd have to argue you were just a biological robot reacting to stimuli. A moist robot, as some have put it.
Which nobody actually believes about themselves. We all experience our own consciousness as a primary reality.
Exactly. It proves that reality is broader than just our immediate sensory perception. We infer the invisible from the visible. And the text argues that this is a perfectly rational way to operate.
And this sets the stage for the discussion on the soul or the ruh in Arabic. This is the ultimate unseen.
It is. This is one of the biggest mysteries for materialism. Science has mapped the human body down to the DNA level. It can describe every chemical reaction, but it still can't explain life itself, the animating principle.
That's the crux of it. What is the difference between living matter and dead matter?
The source asks us to perform a simple thought experiment. Take a living person and a corpse, just seconds after death. Imagine them side by side on 2 tables. Chemically, they are virtually identical. The organs are there, the brain cells are there, the DNA is there, the blood is still warm.
But one is a person and the other is an object, a collection of chemicals.
Right. What left? What is missing? Science cannot quantify that spark. It can explain the mechanism of the heart pumping, but it cannot explain the animating force that makes consciousness, will, and life itself possible.
It's the ghost in the machine.
That's a good way to put it.
And the machine can't explain the ghost because the ghost isn't made of machine parts.
Well put. Materialism hits a wall here. It can explain the hardware with incredible precision, but it can't find the software. It can't explain the user. The text argues that this secret of life is the soul, a non-material entity that by its very nature defies materialist explanation.
All right, this is where it gets really interesting for me. I mean, we've talked logic, we've talked philosophy, now we're going to talk about something tangible, something we can check against our modern knowledge.
Yes, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Segment 3. The source claims that ancient scripture, specifically the Quran, contains scientific facts that were absolutely impossible to know 1,400 years ago.
This is the concept of scientific miracles. The argument is that the Quran serves as a verification of the Creator because it acts like a time capsule of advanced knowledge that a 7th century person could not possibly have possessed.
Now, we have to be careful here, right? Because sometimes people can stretch meanings of old texts to fit modern science, but the source is pretty specific.
It is very specific, and it focuses on fields that didn't even properly exist back then as scientific disciplines.
So let's start with the big one, embryology, the development of the human fetus.
This is a heavy hitter in the text. The source details how the Quran describes the stages of fetal development. It uses specific, technical-sounding Arabic terms, nutfa, alaka, and muga.
Okay, let's break those down. What is nutfa?
Nutfa refers to a drop, or a mixture of fluids. The text interprets this as the zygote, the result of the mixture of the sperm and the egg. That's the starting point. But the real detail, the one that really shocks people, comes with the next stage, alaka.
What does alaka mean? Because that's not a common word.
It's not. The text explains that the word has multiple layers of meaning in Arabic. It can mean a clot of blood, which is how it was often translated historically. but it also means a clinging substance. And most strikingly, it is also the word for a leech, like the animal.
A leech. That's incredibly specific and honestly kind of gross.
At least it.
It is a bit.
It's a bit. But here's the thing. The source references Dr. Keith Moore.
Who is Dr. Keith Moore? We should establish his credentials.
It's important to note Keith Moore wasn't a Muslim scholar. He was a prominent Canadian embryologist, professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. He wrote The Developing Human, which is a standard medical textbook used in universities around the world. He's a top expert in the field.
Okay. And the text claims Moore was astonished by this description. Why? Why would a leech comparison impress a modern scientist?
For two reasons. First, in the early stages, the embryo clings to the uterine wall to implant itself, so it's literally a clinging substance. But second, and this is the incredible part, physically, under a high-powered microscope, the embryo at that stage actually looks like a leech. It has a similar curved, elongated shape.
It looks like a leech.
It looks like a leech, and it acts like a leech. It draws its blood supply from the uterine wall to feed itself, just as a leech draws blood from skin.
Wow. And when was the microscope invented?
In the 1600s. And it wasn't powerful enough to see this kind of detail for a long time after that. We're talking about knowledge that's roughly 1,000 years ahead of its time.
And what was the prevailing scientific view back then?
Well, that's the point Awad is driving at. In the 7th century, the prevailing theories about reproduction were from the ancient Greeks, like Aristotle, or from medieval alchemy. Ideas like the homunculus, a fully formed, perfect miniature human that they thought lived inside the sperm.
Right. They thought the man provided the seed, the tiny person, and the woman was just the incubator, the oven.
Exactly. Completely wrong. The Quranic description contradicts the scientific errors of that time, and according to the author, perfectly matches the discoveries of 20th century embryology.
Okay, what about the next stage? You said mudga?
Yes. Mudga. This word in Arabic means a chewed-like lump, like a piece of meat or gum that has been chewed.
Chewed-like? That sounds very odd.
It does, until you look at the electron microscope photos. At that specific stage of development, the embryo develops what are called somites. They're little bumps along what will become the spine, and they are the precursors to vertebrae and muscles.
Okay.
And when you look at an image of the embryo at this stage, it actually looks like a piece of chewed gum that has teeth marks in it from those somites.
Again, a visual detail that would be completely impossible to see with the naked eye.
Impossible. The text poses the question, how could an illiterate man in the middle of the Arabian desert 1,400 years ago know what an embryo looks like at a microscopic stage? The only logical answer, according to Awad, is that the one who created the embryo is the one who described it.
That is pretty compelling. Okay, moving from the microscopic to the massive. Cosmology, the universe itself.
Right. Another area where the source claims there's foreknowledge. He points to a verse in the Quran that says, regarding the sky or the universe and the heaven we constructed with strength, and indeed we are expanding it.
Expanding.
Yes, the Arabic word used clearly implies continuous expansion. Now, think about the history of science. For centuries, right up until the early 20th century, the scientific consensus, the bedrock of cosmology, was that the universe was static. It was eternal, unchanging, fixed.
Even Einstein thought that for a while, right? He added the cosmological constant to his equations to keep it static.
He did. He later called it his biggest blunder. It wasn't until the 1920s, with the work of astronomers like Edwin Hubble, that we discovered the redshift in distant galaxies. We realized the universe is actually expanding. The galaxies are flying away from each other. The whole fabric of space-time is getting bigger every second.
And the text claims the Quran stated this expansion clearly a millennium before Hubble.
Correct. We are expanding it.
Yep.
It's right there in the present tense, implying an ongoing process.
It also mentions something about the beginning of the universe, right?
Yes, this is another fascinating point. The concepts of Ratku and Fathu. The verse states that the heavens and the earth were a fused entity, or a single unit, which is Ratku, and then they were separated or split apart, which is Fatku.
That sounds a lot like the singularity and the Big Bang.
That's the connection the author makes. The entire universe was once compressed into a single, infinitely dense point, the fused entity, before exploding outward in the Big Bang, the separation. It describes the fundamental mechanism of the Big Bang in two words.
There's one more cosmological point here, the shape of the Earth. I feel like this is always a debate online, unfortunately.
The flat Earth debate.
Yes.
Well, the text analyzes a verse about the alternation of night and day. And it doesn't just say night follows day. It uses the Arabic word Takwir.
What does takwir mean, specifically?
In classical Arabic, takwir means to wrap something around a spherical object. The classic example is wrapping a turban around a head. You wouldn't use the word takwir for laying a blanket on a flat bed. You use it for winding or coiling something around a round object.
So the very verb being used implies roundness.
It implies a continuous wrapping motion over a sphere. The source argues this directly contradicts the flat Earth beliefs that were common in many ancient cultures at the time. It implies the Earth is a sphere and the day and night are continuously wrapping around it as it rotates.
It's fascinating because usually when we think of religion and science, we think of them fighting. We think of Galileo under house arrest. We think of the Scopes monkey trial. That's the popular narrative.
And that brings us perfectly to segment 4, religion, history, and the progress of science. This is where Awad directly challenges that popular narrative, which is known as the conflict thesis.
The idea that religion inherently holds science back, that to be religious is to be anti-science.
Right. And Awad argues that this is a fundamentally Eurocentric view. It's a projection of a specific European historical experience onto all religion for all time. He claims that while Europe was indeed in the Dark Ages, struggling with a church hierarchy that did, at times, suppress certain scientific inquiries.
The Islamic world was having a very different experience.
A completely different experience. It was in its golden age.
We're talking about a time when algebra was invented, right?
Algebra,
Oh.
al-Jab, which means the restoration. Massive advancements in optics by people like Ibn al-Haytham, who is arguably the father of the modern scientific method. Chemistry, astronomy, medicine, hospitals, universities. It was a flourishing of scientific thought.
And the source claims these Muslim scientists like Ibn al-Haytham or al-Biruni weren't doing this despite their religion.
No, this is the key point. They were motivated by it.
Motivated by it? How so? Usually we think science replaces the need for religion.
Not in this context. The Quran, as a text, frequently commands the believer to read, to ponder, to observe the heavens and the earth, to look for the signs of the Creator in His creation. There is a concept called tafakkur, which is depth reflection on creation.
Okay.
So for these scientists, discovering the laws of physics was a form of worship. It was uncovering the sunnah, or the habits and systems of the Creator. It was a spiritual act.
So science was a way to get closer to God, to appreciate the craftsmanship.
Exactly. To study the painting is to honor the painter. If you believe God created the universe with perfect laws, then studying how those laws work is studying God's magnificent work. There is no conflict. It's an act of devotion.
The text also mentions that this influence didn't stay in the Islamic world. It eventually reached the West.
Yes. The text lists giants of science who were devout believers, not just Muslim scientists, but Western ones too, who built on that foundation. People like Newton, Kepler, Bacon, Boyle. The fathers of modern Western science were, by and large, deeply religious men.
You mentioned Francis Bacon. He's often called the father of the scientific method.
He is. And the source makes a very specific historical claim about Francis Bacon. It argues that his ideas on the experimental method, observation, hypothesis, testing, verification, didn't just come from a vacuum.
Right.
He was heavily influenced by the works of Arab scientists, particularly Ibn al-Haytham, whose work on optics was a masterclass in the experimental method centuries earlier. That knowledge trickled into Europe, often via scholars like Roger Bacon, who studied Arab works in the 13th century and advocated for the same methods.
So the roots of the modern scientific method trace back to this religious civilization.
That's the argument. The text suggests that the perceived rift between science and religion is a specific historical experience of the European Church, most famously the Galileo affair, which was then falsely projected onto Islam and religion in general. But in the Islamic context presented by Awad, there's no theological conflict with observing the natural world. In fact, it was encouraged.
It reframes the whole narrative. It's not science versus religion. It's, in this view, science fueled by religion.
Precisely. The source argues that true science and true faith are not just compatible, they are allies. They are two different ways of reading the same book of creation.
So if we step back now and look at the whole picture that Awad is painting here, what does this all mean for us today? Let's try to summarize it.
If we boil it down, it's really a three-pronged approach. 1. Monotheism is logical, because the sheer complexity of the universe makes chance a mathematical impossibility.
That's the printing press and the protein argument.
Exactly. 2. Monotheism is verifiable, because, the author claims, the Quran contains specific knowledge that transcends its time, acting as a kind of prophetic evidence.
The embryology and the expanding universe.
Right. And 3, true science is an ally of faith, not an enemy. History, when read correctly, proves they can and did work together to advance human knowledge.
It's a very comprehensive worldview. It tries to tackle the head and the heart, logic and evidence.
It is, and it all circles back to a core concept in the text, the idea of fitra.
The natural disposition, what does that mean?
It's the idea that deep down, when you strip away arrogance or cultural conditioning or just the distractions of daily life, humans are instinctively drawn to acknowledge a higher power. It's our factory setting, so to speak.
It's that feeling you get when you're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, or you look up at a perfectly clear, starry night, or you see a newborn baby and you just feel, this isn't random, this can't be an accident.
Exactly. That intuitive sense that there is meaning behind the mechanics. That we are not just accidents of chemistry playing out on a rock flying through space.
You know, there's one analogy from the very start of our conversation that really sticks with me. The printing press.
It is a powerful image.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought on that. In our daily lives, at our jobs, in the software we write, in the art we make, in the buildings we design, we demand order. If we see a single typo in a report, we know someone made a mistake.
Right.
If we see a perfectly functioning app on our phone, we know a team of developers spent thousands of hours meticulously coding it.
We never assume complex, functional things happen by accident in our own lives. We would fire anyone who claimed that the annual financial report just wrote itself on the server.
Exactly. So the provocative thought is this. If we demand order, logic, and a creator for the smallest things we build as humans, why are we so willing to accept chaos and randomness as the explanation for the infinitely more complex universe that allows us to build them in the first place?
That is a question worth sitting with. It's a question about intellectual consistency.
It definitely is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into between monotheism and atheism.
My pleasure. It was a great discussion.
And to our listeners, keep asking those big questions. We'll see you next time.